Welcome back to Take Action News, everybody. That music means it is time for Daniel Marin's How It Should Be, a special version of it today. Daniel, take it away.
Well, that's right, David. It's a special version because we're continuing with our guest from a little bit earlier in the show who we did not quite get enough chance to talk to, and that's Nancy Cohen. She's the author of Delirium, The Politics of Sex in America, a historian and sociologist. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us again.
Daniel, good to be here.
So you apparently write in the book, perhaps if the pill had never been invented, American politics would be very different today. And of course, you're talking about the birth control pill. What exactly do you mean, and how has the evolution of sex in the country since the 1960s and 70s produced the kinds of politics we're seeing right now in the state houses in places like Texas and North Carolina?
So I think this summer shows us that the Republican Party has become obsessed with the sex lives of other people. And so the story I tell in Delirium is, we know that the Republican Party is a party of the right, by the right, and for the right. But what we're seeing now is the logical result of 40 years of what I call sexual counter-revolution. This all started in reaction against the sexual revolution, which was enabled by the pill, and the women's and gay rights movements of the late 60s and early 70s. And, we're hearing a lot about abortion, but this movement didn't start against abortion. It started against fighting the Equal Rights Amendment for women. And it was a movement started by women, by fundamentalist Christians and Orthodox Catholics. After they fought the ERA, they fought child care, universal child care. After that, they went on to gay rights. Only about 5-10 years later did they become obsessed with abortion. And I think what you see by looking at the origins of this movement, what we're seeing in Texas today, what we're seeing in North Carolina today, what we're seeing in Wisconsin, is seeing that it is really fundamentally about putting women back in the home, putting gays back in the closet, and kind of stuffing the genie of sex back in the bottle of traditional marriage. And unfortunately, one of the major parties in our country is obsessed with these issues of kind of lady parts and sex and gays instead of the real issues that we face as a nation.
There's so many different ways to go, things to talk about, just tied into everything that you just said. And one of them, to me, is just how hypocritical in some ways this stuff is, because it seems like when it's a man who gets trapped in a situation where a woman he doesn't want to be pregnant is pregnant, well, then it's, I think about Scott DesJarlais, a congressman from Tennessee, a Republican, who was a doctor, and apparently just a really very promiscuous guy who got several of his nurses and assistants pregnant and insisted, that they all get, multiple abortions over this period. And presumably he's also sort of one of these Christian right type Republicans. And so it seems like if you're a dude and it becomes inconvenient for the woman that you knocked up to be pregnant, well, it reminds me of Mad Men and kind of the 60s era attitude about women. It's not so much the abortion itself, it's about the, kind of the patriarchy.
Yeah, it's absolutely about control of women. And I guess I just want to say, to all the men listening, I think most of the men listening to your show know this, that, forcing women back into the traditional family and traditional roles is a way to control women, but it's also a way to control men. So someone like, DesJarlais, I think what you see in the Republican right today is you have the opportunistic hypocrites, and then you have the true believers. So Rick Perry is a true believer, and a lot of this started in Texas, so it's not surprised that this is kind of a hot point of it. But then you have the ones that just have to kowtow to the sexual fundamentalists in their base. So you have this creep, DesJarlais, or however you say his name. But you also have someone like Chris Christie, who is kind of putting himself forward as the pragmatic, moderate, but he vetoed family planning funding in the New Jersey budget. He's still, he vetoed gay marriage. So it shows that the Republican Party has become a wholly owned subsidiary of these sexual fundamentalists.
Finally, Nancy, very briefly, you seem to think that there might be something hopeful coming out of this darkness right now, in that we may be, even if we lose now, is there some silver lining here in terms of energizing our base and making our people that do care about women's rights more vigilant about these threats? Yes.
Okay, so one, these right-wing sexual fundamentalists are the zombies of American politics, right? You would think they would have learned their lesson in 2012. No, they lost. They were declared dead. Lo and behold, they rise again. And so over and over again over the last 40 years, they've had these comebacks by stealth, by people not paying attention in off-year elections, not paying attention to state legislatures. And I really credit the women's advocacy groups, Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Emily's List, NARAL, all of whom have kind of new and younger leadership, with keeping the news of what they're doing in front of the public. And the progressive media helps that way, and the fact that we have social media that can kind of nationalize these very local struggles. So I think the way to put an end to this is for people to stay organized, to vote, to pay attention to what's happening in their state legislatures, and to put this outside pressure on these people to make it politically dangerous for them to take these measures. And only then are we going to see this, very tiny minority movement actually defeated at the ballot box. But it shouldn't be too hard if people stay engaged.
Nancy Cohen, ending on a hopeful note. Nancy is the author of Delirium, The Politics of Sex in America. I encourage everyone to go out and read it. It's a very important history because, folks, if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat those mistakes. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us on Take Action News.
Thank you.
That's all for this week, folks. But when Take Action News continues next week, we've got another show ahead of us. And this is Daniel Marins on behalf of David Shuster, Charlie Mitchell, Ben Barnett, Keith Atkinson, Rachel Calvert, Pete Callahan on the board today, manning a lot of challenges this week, but getting it done. This is Daniel Marins signing off and saying, see you next week on Take Action News.